Now, we spoke about the research you did. You said you interviewed a lot of experts in the field.
Yeah.
What did they have to say when it came to the theories of these, for lack of a better term, racist claims?
Okay, so in terms of science, firstly, the race is at most a kind of convenient shorthand description, but really it has no scientific basis. The genetic variance within the so-called races is often much greater than that between them. So within Africa, you have much more genetic variation than you do, say, between European and Indian populations, say in Eurasia, and it's because only relatively small groups migrated to Asia and then Europe. So there was much more genetic variation in Africa. So the idea of race then is fallacious in a scientific sense. It's all it's describing are very superficial characteristics, skin color, hair type, things like that. But that's not profound in terms of your whole genome. So that's the first point that scientists will make. So then one looks at different population groups, and that's a term that scientists use more often rather than races. So you look at different population groups, and indeed there is some variation between them. So for example, people who live in malaria zones, there are more people who have sickle cell anemia there. And the result of that is because if you have one allele of a particular gene, then that protects you against malaria. So Pesachs in the Jewish community, lactose tolerance, we evolved for that, skin color. So those, in that sense, there has been continued evolution of humanity. But all of those are single gene mutations, whereas intelligence is involves a network of thousands of genes. So you're not comparing like to like, because one of the racist arguments is that, look, people have evolved for skin color, people have evolved for sickle cell anemia, therefore, what's to say they're not evolving for intelligence? And the answer to that is that you're not, it's trying to compare apples and oranges, or fish and bicycles. Yeah.
Now, as we see in the book, the study, the racist study keeps popping up in different forms year after year, and you speak about the bell curve. Now, this was published in 1994. Can you talk us through what exactly the bell curve set out to prove?
Okay, the bell curve was, as you say, a book. It came out in America in 1994 with huge publicity, and what it was arguing, it was the two authors were arguing, was that the reason people were poor was because they were stupid, basically. They had lower IQ. So it wasn't the other. Most people say that the reason people in poorer areas have lower IQs relates to poverty. But they were saying, no, it's the low IQs were causing the poverty. And the corollary of that, they said, was the reason in America why there were more poor black people was because they said that black people are innately less intelligent than white people. So that was the core argument. Look, it was a long book. There were lots of other stuff in it, but that's the kind of core argument of the racist section of the book. And in common with a lot of this kind of the people who hold this kind of view, they believe that IQ is something that is biological. So that how you score on an IQ test is a reflection of your innate intelligence. So, I mean, the arguments against that are, if we take separated identical twins who've grown up in different class backgrounds, their IQs sometimes vary by as much as 30 points. Wow. So it's clearly there's a very strong environmental element to it. And what we also know is that each generation, average IQ scores get higher. So in order to keep a mean of 100, it's supposed to be the average, they have to make the IQ test more and more difficult. Now, people are not genetically changing, but what is changing is their exposure to abstract logic. So at the moment, like kids, for example, who play like Tetris or Grand Theft Auto or whatever, they're dealing with abstraction and with concepts in a way that will help them in IQ tests, and that has been demonstrated. So the reason why different population groups might have different average IQs has nothing to do with genetics. What it has to do with is the kind of exposure, particularly in early childhood, that they've had to abstraction.
Happy Saturday. I am Joseph Ward. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. And if you are watching this, I appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and share this video, share this channel, share this information, because we get it in over here and we really tackle the topics that need to be tackled for the Black community, for us to make sure that we can change as much as we can to have as bright a future as we can make for ourselves, because it's going to be on us to make the future that we want for us. So comment, subscribe, share, hit that like button, because if you don't hit that like button, then you don't like Black people. Joe Biden told me to tell you. So if you are watching this video, thank you. It is Saturday, and of course, this is not live because I am in Bennettsville, South Carolina for the Country Style Cook-Off, for the supporting the Country Style 2 YouTube channel, Art Fennell. So I love that content. Been wanting to go to the Country Style Cook-Off for a while, so I am there. But I appreciate you for tuning in to this, because, hey, I want to make sure that I leave you with something good. So we are getting it in. Okay, so you saw the clip opening up. The gentleman, I forgot the gentleman's name. It was on the screen. You saw it. But and I gotta do better remember them names, but hell, I don't remember the name. But basically, he wrote a book, and in the book he was citing and or refuting the idea of Black inferiority when it comes to intelligence, as you saw him explaining, right? Because the theory of the white racists, the white supremacists, is Black people are inherently inferior. We're inherently inferior when it comes to intelligence, and we're inherently inferior when it comes to genetics. And as a matter of fact, we're not even the same type of human that they are. We're a subhuman species, an inferior human species, not the same as them. And that's why it's okay for them to dominate us and treat us the way that they treat us. That's the reason why racism exists. So I want to start off with that clip to kind of get your palate wet, because I'm getting into a debate. We're going to watch a debate between Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Dr. William Shockley. And William Shockley is trying to prove that Blacks are inferior, and eugenics is something that needs to be employed either on the Black community or within the Black community to rid us of the so-called weak ones. Because of genetics, we have produced weak people. How many weak people? I don't know. We're going to get into it, but it's going to be a good debate, good conversation that we're getting into. Of course, you know, I'm going to be giving my piece, giving some information on it, because I got my computer in front of me, did my research, I'm ready for this. I got my water. And we want to talk about this, though, because the racist propaganda is what helps white supremacists continue to eliminate Black people and propagandize Black people, which will lead to the further elimination or the suppression of any gains that Black people would make en masse. Of course, we know the few pets will eat through the system, but for the most part, the majority of Black people, we are seen as something that could be a blockade to white supremacy really flourishing the way it's supposed to in their eyes. So they want to make sure that they suppress us. And I remember in the early days of America, America was Black and white. You had Native Americans, which numbers greatly dwindled. You had a few Asians, numbers were not vast, right? So America was mostly Black and white. And we were the thorn in the side, or the nemesis to the white population. Of course, things have changed now, but we are still a nemesis or in competition to all other groups. But before all of these things happen with these other groups today, we were dealing with white people and their racist ideologies. And remember, what we're also gonna highlight and get into is the racist history of the sciences, how a lot of these social sciences were developed in America, and the racist history of the medical industry in America. Because of the idea that Black people were not human, Black people didn't feel pain, Black people were genetically inferior, an inferior subspecies of human. So because of this, we can experiment on them. A lot of the scientific advancements that were made were due to the inhumane studies, quote unquote studies, but the inhumane treatment of Black people in these laboratory environments, in these torture environments, in these terroristic environments that they use to so-called advance science and learn more about humanity, the body, the brain, and all these other things, all these other sciences, rather, that they were able to produce in the 18 and 1900s. So I've said my piece. Let's get into it. Let's let Dr. Welsing teach this young man something, and then I'm gonna drop my pieces into it. So remember to hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share. I appreciate you all for tuning in, even though this is not live. You know, I'll be back live next Saturday. So let's go.
Back in the 70s, a man named Dr. William Shockley, a noted scientist, embarked upon the mission of proving to the world that Black people are genetically inferior, without, I might add, the benefit of any formal background in genetics.
That's that white audacity. That's that white audacity. No formal background in genetics. Did a little bit of research, came across some information, and is bold enough to step out into the mainstream and promote the idea of Black inferiority and, you know, Black people not being on the same level as white people. The audacity, the caucasity, rather, the caucasity.
He became front page news and won headlines with his controversial views. On campus after campus, unrest followed his every visit. My position then and now is that if a supremacist cannot be rationally debated, perhaps he has a point. After the debate you're now going to see, Dr. Shockley went back into oblivion. I don't claim that the 1973 interview did it alone, but I am of the opinion that it helped. I'm Tony Brown. In a moment, Racial Superiority with Dr. William Shockley. We have two very prominent educators, scholars on Black Journal tonight, and we feel that it is important to defend the First Amendment rights of all Americans. Dr. William Shockley, one of our guests, has had quite a difficult time speaking at some universities, and particularly some Black college students do not agree with his theories. On Black Journal, we feel that Dr. Shockley's rights in the First Amendment area are parallel to Black people's rights. That is, that Dr. Shockley must have a platform for his views if Black people are to have a platform for their views. Dr. Frances Welsing, on the other side, has difficulty in expressing her views on legitimate mass media outlets because many whites do not agree with her theory of genetics. Now let's find out what the controversy is about. Dr. Shockley, please give us the benefit, basically, of what your theory is.
My principal point, Mr. Brown, is not so much a theory of black-white differences, but is summed up in one word, which is the theme of my appearance on your program and my efforts, and the word is dysgenics. And dysgenics means effectively downbreeding, retrogressive evolution. And I fear that this is worst for the Black community, and I particularly welcome an opportunity to appear on Black Journal just for these reasons. And let me say also that when I first met Dr. Welsing, it was not Black students who were disrupting, but white students. And Dr. Welsing made a very sincere and I thought extremely effective effort, a well-planned effort. It was not effective with these white students at Staten Island Community College, so I would have a chance to speak. In fact, I think they prevented her from saying what she wanted to say when she was trying to gain me a platform. So my main theme is that we have problems that we should face and we should look at connected with dysgenics, and I welcome any opportunity I have to bring this out so that people can look at it and worry about it.
So I looked up dysgenics, and dysgenics is exerting a detrimental effect on later generations through the inheritance of undesirable characteristics. So he's hinting at dysgenics being something that has afflicted Black people, and is one of the reasons why we have the undesirable characteristics that we have, because of our genetic dysfunction as a people. That's what he's getting at. Wow. Okay.
Dr. Shockley, you are accused of having a theory that is a white racist theory. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I've considered whether or not I am a racist. Racist is an epithet that used to damage my self-esteem, but it doesn't anymore. I feel it's untrue. If you look in the dictionary as to what racist means, it means emotional feelings, irrational feelings associated with fear and hate. If I really had those, I don't think I would be here this evening. I feel that what I'm engaged in is a demand for diagnosis, and I'd like to say some more about this chart, which we'll come to probably later, which shows the disproportionate rates of reproduction for the least effective elements of the Black community.
So before he gets into that, so let's deal with racism. Let's get a little foundational stuff. Let's go to Merriam-Webster and see what racist. And so racist is of relating to or characterized by racism, such as having, reflecting, or fostering the belief that race is a fundamental detriment of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce the inherent superiority of a particular race. So according to Merriam-Webster, he is racist. He is pushing racist ideologies. He is enacting racist, because racism is not only ideas, but it is ideas acted upon, because you have the ability to act upon those ideas. So the fact, remember in the beginning, Tony Brown was talking about Dr. Shockley with his false and racist ideas was accepted by the mainstream media, while Dr. Welsing, with her ideas that countered the racist ideas, was not accepted by the white media, the white mainstream media. So Shockley was actually given a platform by the system to push his ideas of Black genetic and intellectual inferiority. He was given a platform, so he has the ability to act upon his ideas and his theories, which makes him a racist. It's the definition of racism. So let's get a little history, right? It says, so, you know, I did a little chat GPT on what is racism and talking about the history of scientific and medical racism in America. But before we get into that, let's get into racism, right? And the concept of race. We talked about this before, but let's get into it, right? The concept of race was created as a tool to justify inequality, exploitation, and domination, particularly during the rise of European colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and global imperialism. It is not a biological fact, but a social construct invented to divide humanity into hierarchical categories based on physical characteristics, most notably skin color, right? So it says in the 15th to 19th centuries, European powers began enslaving Africans and colonizing large parts of Africa, the Americas, and Asia. To morally and legally justify the enslavement of millions of Africans and the violent takeover of the indigenous lands, European thinkers developed the idea that non-Europeans were inferior, subhuman, or civilized. Africans were described as naturally suited to enslavement, physically strong, but intellectually weak based off the physical characteristics, right? Indigenous people were labeled as savages, needing Europeans to control or civilize them. By creating a hierarchy of races, with white Europeans at the top, colonial and slave-holding societies could rationalize their brutal practices as part of a natural or divine order. So they literally believed, they were indoctrinated and codified the belief that they were the genetic and intellectual superior race on earth, and all other races need to be subdued and colonized by them and taught the ways of the white man, because if it was different it was wrong. If it wasn't white, it wasn't right. So I don't know what he's talking about. He's categorically wrong. He's wronger than a mug. He's out here talking that bull, right? But once again, he's acting as if he don't understand what he's doing. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he's full of shit. And he acted like he don't know what he's doing. He acting like he don't really understand that he's pushing racist ideologies, when in fact that's all he's doing. That's the root of what he's doing, to push the racist ideologies of genetic inferiority, and to even imply that eugenics should be employed to weed out the bottom feeders. Like, that's crazy. But let's jump back into it. Hit that like button. Make sure you hit that like button, because we cooking today. Let's get back into it.
I'd like to say more about that than we should in just this brief introduction. But I think there is another word that better describes what I'm involved in, and that word is raceology, which means a scientific analysis of racial differences. And basically, I have a faith that reason is a good thing, and I feel, as you do about the First Amendment, but maybe with a slightly different emphasis. I think the really important thing about the First Amendment is it is a way of guaranteeing a high likelihood that truth will emerge as a result of conflicting ideas being expressed, and I have a thesis and a basic belief that truth is a good thing and will be of benefit to man.
Thank you. Dr. Francis Welsing, give us the benefit of your theory.
Get him, Dr. Welsing.
Well, my theory was, I wrote the paper in 1969. I wrote a paper called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. And the sole reason behind writing that paper was an attempt to understand the behavior of white people in relationship to all people of color, every place in the world, black, brown, red, and yellow people. And the paper was presented to the Americans at the National Medical Association, the section on psychiatry in neurology, because back in 1969, the Black Caucus in the American Psychiatric Association, we had said that racism, and when we talk about racism, we're talking about the white supremacy behavior of white people. That racism was the #1 mental health problem in the nation, and it was the #1 cause of other mental health problems. And I wanted to understand what this thing of racism really is all about, because it's the thing that has caused woe and misery and suffering for the vast majority of the people on this planet that are classified as non-white. Right. And in my attempt to understand why the necessity of white people to keep saying that white is superior and that the condition of non-white is inferior. And the more I thought about it, in conjunction with an idea that a friend of mine had, that racism was a worldwide behavioral system for the maintenance of white supremacy by a small minority of people, I put those ideas together with what we know about genetics, what we know about the condition of skin whiteness itself. The condition of skin whiteness is the genetic inability to produce skin pigment called melanin. This is a genetic recessive trait. It is a genetic deficiency state, not as defined by Francis Welsing, but defined by geneticists and dermatologists.
And I just want to stop it right there, not to cut her off, but stop it right there. But remember, that's it. The fear of genetic annihilation is a hill that Dr. Welsing proverbially died upon, basically saying that is one of the main forces behind the system of white supremacy, is the fear of genetic annihilation, because white people, especially white people in America, because of their proximity to the black population in America and the vast growing population, or just the population period, the black men could breed them out. And so you have to keep the black men in check. You have to keep their sexuality in check. You have to keep their mentality in check. Keep those black bucks in check. Break those bucks. And then once that happens, the women and children are vulnerable, so you can impose yourself, and then you can socially engineer the women and children to what you want them to become, and then come back and socially engineer the men into what you want them to become once you've broken the buck. And therefore, it can help you to further dominate and maintain the system of white supremacy. So, yeah.
That the inability to produce the skin pigment of melanin or melanin pigment is described as albinism. And I think that white people, even though most white people are not consciously understanding their problem in genetics, they are certainly aware that they are genetically dominated by people of color. That's why it was a statement, one drop of black blood makes you black, because people of color have the genetic capacity to annihilate white people. And so unless white people control the reproductivity of people of color, then we can postulate that perhaps one day there won't be any white people. And I think that the very survival of white people necessitates that they project genetic inferiority on people of color, because it is they who really are aware that they are genetic recessive and perhaps genetically inferior to people of color. And I am not saying this to call the condition of skin whiteness to say, well, no, white people are inferior. I'm not saying it for that purpose, but I think that it is of prime importance for the majority of people in the world to understand why it is that white people have to, the effective majority, large numbers of white people, have to move in a hostile, in an aggressive way against people of color, and have to constantly focus on it's you who's genetically inferior, because they realize that there's something wrong with their genetic status. Now,